Hi, ghost hunting fans! If you enjoyed Family Spirits, the adventures and evidence of Gallo family ghost hunters, you're going to love Family Spirits 2, Purpose and the Paranormal by Bobby J. Gallo. Paperback and Nookbook available through Barnes & Noble. More adventure, more evidence, more ghosts. Materialize your copy today.
Hey folks, Bobby J. Gallo here, and welcome to Creepy Conversations from the Castle. I am so excited tonight. I can't even put it into words because we have a real superstar in the paranormal field right here, Mr. Ron Iacovetti. And this is going to be fun. We're gonna have an informal conversation tonight, and I think there's going to be a lot of really cool things discussed. Now, I don't know over the course of the broadcast exactly how many people are going to be here. I know. Oh, look at Jenny's here. Hi, Jenny. How you doing? This morning at about 10 o'clock, we just passed 17,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't even know how it's happening. It's a mystery to me. All of a sudden, it just seemed to click. In tandem with some things that I'm doing promotional wise for the channel, but still 17,000. So I do know that last week, later on in the broadcast, people started popping in around 9 o'clock, which is why I wanted to start that today. Hey, Todd and Carmela, how are you? And there's Gonyak Paranormal. How are you? So I'm hoping that as the broadcast goes on and people see that we're broadcasting live, we're going to be getting some people up. And there's Kasoon. Kasoon, thank you for joining us. Kasoon is from Sri Lanka.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. He likes to attend these. He's very, very knowledgeable and very into it. And there's John Strobin that we did our last show with, and that was an awesome show. So, Ron, this is awesome. Thank you for coming. I did not expect you to do this. I'm so grateful that you have. We got a lot of things going on. I know you're doing the Staticom thing, which is just absolutely amazing. You have a new book coming out, and we're actually going to be doing an unveiling of that book cover a little bit later that I think everybody's really going to enjoy. But this show is not a formal show. We don't have anything scripted. It's just an informal conversation between you and me because we've talked at Paracons before, and it always turns out to be an interesting conversation when you and I really start getting deep into this.
Yeah.
So, just give me your thoughts. Is there anything that you want to start off with?
Yeah, I mean, I want to start out with that whole superstar thing. I'm no more superstar than anybody else in the field. My mantra has always been, the field's not great because I'm in it. I'm in it because it's great. And people like you are one of the reasons I feel that way. No surprise that I would do this when you're doing an open conversation, which can go into some stuff. Like you said, you and I will get started on a conversation, and sometimes it'll go many layers deep as we're both trying to figure out, what this stuff is all about. And we bring similar and different things to the table. So yeah, anytime I have to have a conversation with you, I would absolutely welcome. And of course, the friends that we have in common, a lot of the folks watching, Raul from Tower Paranormal, Todd and Carmela, Jenny Colucci, some of your followers, like I said, Kasun, Exploring the Supernatural with Phi. That's your guest you just had on. What was his name again?
That's John Strobin.
John Strobin. Well, that was very cool. Nice of him to show up as well and support the show and what you're doing. So yeah, man, you're one of those people that, and I say this a lot. I talk about you. You take an academic approach to what you're doing, and I think when you do that, I don't think that the through line for what we do is I'm right, you're wrong. That's not the purpose. We do it so that we can contribute to the conversation. and maybe we become right through what we were right and wrong about collectively. We'll share our views. I'll share some of the things I think, some of the ways I see things. But no, by no means do I consider myself, name the word, expert, guru, authority. I'm a student at whatever level I'm at. And tomorrow, hopefully I'll be a step ahead of that level, and the day after that, and so on.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people in this field that we get into it for different reasons, as we know. I mean,
Yes.
You and I think we kind of hit it off because we're in it for the same reasons. We're trying to prove the existence of the afterlife, just to cut it down to its lowest common denominator. But some people get in this to ghost hunt. They get into it. A lot of people, it's an adrenaline rush for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I don't see it that way. That's not how I got in it. And if a lot of people look at my channel and they're looking at, my green screen over here, they may say, well, you're kind of sensational. And, you look like you're in it for the trappings of being a paranormal investigator. That's not really the case. The reason I do it is to attract attention. Because unless we get initial attention, we can't reveal everything that we've discovered up until this point. So we're going to do a fancy thumbnail for YouTube for this show. We are going to have a green screen. We are going to put nice covers on our books. We have to do these things because we have to get people's attention. If we're too sterile and we're too academic in what we're trying to present, we're going to lose people and we're going to get lost in the shuffle. One of the people that trained us was Dr. Harry Stafford, and he's passed on. But when he trained us as a family and my kids were small, he wrote a couple books, and I was able to find them recently, and they're so dry. And God bless him. He was just a wonderful, wonderful man, and smart as anything, and taught us how to use temperature guns and EMF detectors and everything that was state of the art up until that point. And this was about 12 years ago. But I don't think when it came to actually getting his findings out there, I think that's where he may have fallen a little bit short, but it certainly wasn't on the academic side.
Right. I don't think we ever have to apologize for why we got into it. I started under the moniker of Ghost Hunter, not for thrill seeking, but just I was curious. It was something I found interesting. I always liked those types of things when an old show would incorporate something spooky or a ghost story.
Right.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then what you're talking about as far as the presentation wise, I don't think that's a problem either. As long as, if you're doing Broadway theatrics with smoke machines and lights and stuff and presenting it as an academic lecture or a symposium, no. But if you're presenting your stuff in a social forum the way you do, for the purposes, like you said, of making it eye-catching and intriguing, because there is value to that people assess, right? That's a value judgment they'll make when they look at something before they even hear you say anything. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you dress the contents up, I don't think there's a problem with that. If the contents themselves are the facade and that's all you have is more exterior, then I agree with where you were going with that. Then I think you're propagating shallowness on top of shallowness, and I think that's where we run into problems with some of the folks who are perhaps not doing this for the right reasons. Back in the day, your worth was why you ended up on a poster or an advertisement. Today, your worth is because you're on a poster or an advertisement. And I think that's not a good move. I think, just because you have a social following does not make an authority figure or somebody who should have followers under the idea that you're professing or teaching anything.
Correct. No, I agree with everything you just said. And, here on YouTube, that's a big problem, honestly, because a lot of people here on YouTube are here just to be YouTube influencers, YouTube stars. They just want to be YouTubers. And that's kind of like the name. I only came back because this is where the people are. And I've tried every platform known to man. And as we know a lot of people that are members of these paranormal streaming services that are behind paywalls and whatnot. And it's tough for them. It's tough for them to get an audience. But, I came back to YouTube, last April, we had 1,200 subscribers, and something just hit, something just clicked. And I remember I was begging people, and you were the one that put me over 1,500 subscribers. And all of a sudden, here we are, 4 months later, and we just passed 17,000 subscribers. And they're from all over the world. Like Kasun is a great example, from Sri Lanka. But there's more. They're everywhere. And the reason I mention all of this is if you look at our video, you see a lot of comments now. And the one common theme that I'm seeing throughout the threads is the authenticity. And they're like, you guys really don't look like, we're not running around screaming demon, demon, demon. We're really trying to figure this out, and we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, we do not have this nailed, but you're coming close, my friend. You're coming close, and that's what really fascinates me, because ITC is where it's at, and you are on the cutting edge of that. And, there's going to be a lot of people seeing you for the first time on this, because, again, this is worldwide. Tell them a little bit about Stochastic. I want to hear about that.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity. Anytime, this is another thing I think that's somewhat deficient in our field now, as I think when you supplant gratitude with entitlement, every step you take is on the wrong path. Everything we get, every podcast, every opportunity to speak, every Paracon, large or small, every library or presentation we get to do is something we're grateful for. Because the field or the people in it don't owe us anything just because we've been in it for how long we've been in it. Just because we think we have something that's special, it doesn't matter. And as soon as people get their heads around that, they'll start appreciating what they have and not looking at what they don't.
Right.
So first of all, I thank you for that, because I know you work hard for your following. So anytime you share it, that should be the attitude that you're approached with is gratitude. The ITC thing, man, it's an element. It's a vertical of paranormal research, afterlife research. It's not the only aspect of it. It is certainly intriguing. The element of what we call a PPO, a permanent paranormal object. Unlike if you get touched or pushed or you feel something tug your hair, those experiences happen to people, no doubt. But for the purposes of re-examining and trying to learn from something that you can share over and over and over again. Audio evidence is a primary thing that allows you to do that. It is a permanent paranormal object. So that was what intrigued me about it. The vocal evidence was just, even from EVP, was fascinating. Stochastic was born out of a couple things. The core method, the foundation for it, was something called direct radio voice. It predates the spirit boxes, the Frank's box. It was done in Europe. Out of the pioneers not the TV pioneers. I always like to make that clear. The actual pioneers of vocal phenomena over in Europe birthed direct radio voice out of EVP research, where they used white noise as audio support. From that, direct radio voice was born, and arguably the highest level of efficacy I've ever seen in a method. I've never seen a ghost box do what direct radio voice had done. And so back in 2019, that was why Lourdes and I picked up the mantle and brought it back. I was mentored in by Dr. Annabel Cardoso, who's in Spain. She is the only, if I'm not mistaken, surviving member of the original guard for the people who pioneered it. Marcello Bacci, who's most known for it, passed away. Ernst Sinkowski, physicist in Germany, who came up with the term ITC, he's gone. The Foys that did the skull experiment, Robin Foy, she knew. Konstantin Radove, Friedrich Jurgensen, who's the father of direct radio voice. So these people she knew and sat with. So her endorsement meant the world to me. She actually just submitted the Stochastic project's files to the Swedish Society of Parapsychological Research in Stockholm.
Wow, that's
because they asked her if there was anything new and exciting in ITC, and she texted me. She goes, "And of course, I thought of you." And we're just no, of course, thank you. There's no, of course.
It's true though. It's
so
true.
We bring this method back, and then over a few years, Lourdes and I try everything from blending and heterodyning frequencies, tone generators, to a mixing board, shortwave, long wave, mixing it with UHF, white noise, the whole gamut. Direct radio voice was essentially when they would use shorter medium wave frequency on an AM band, just the white noise on a vacant channel, no radio emissions, and that was it. And the results were phenomenal. And I looked at Lourdes back in the day, and I went, in 2019, I was like, I can't believe nobody's doing this. But as you and I both know, in America, if it's not on television, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
It fell out of favor.
Right.
And then the ghost box, which works, became what I call the Q-tip of the paranormal. What do I mean by that? When you clean your ears with those things, it's a cotton swab. But we call it a Q-tip because the brand has made itself synonymous with the product. So ITC's Q-tip is the ghost box. It becomes synonymous with ITC. People think box, device, sweeping, radio. That's what they think of. It's branded itself. So we bring this method back that doesn't have the sweeping. It did have radio, but it was a vacant channel. We do all this experimentation for a number of years. Flash forward now 2 or so years ago, we partnered with Tony and Sheree Rathman from Entity Voices Paranormal Investigations out in Arizona. Tony, one of the best ITC people in the business, built ghost boxes that ran really well, quiet, for 13 years, never sold one, which is not a knock on those who sell it. I get the industry. I get the income possibilities. But when somebody says they're genuinely about research and they have opportunities to sell and they don't, it speaks volumes to me. And so I thought this was a great partnership. They're really good people. So over the last couple of years, Direct Radio Voice became Staticom because he did an experiment in front of a live audience at a Paracon when he used a sleep machine for the white noise, which is pre-recorded noise on a chipcorder.
Right.
We did Direct Radio Voice with a radio under the surface of the earth in a zinc mine in New Jersey, where radio signals and cell signals go to die. And we got voices. And then we realized that the idea even behind the ghost box, that radio signal, RF signal, the carrier wave was part of how communication came in, wasn't the case. We believe it's resonance, called stochastic or inverse stochastic resonance with the white noise, which means the white noise, which is every frequency a human can hear, 20 hertz to 20,000. If anything enters into that and resonates with just one of those frequencies, you get amplitude, you get resonance. And then our process that we developed with Direct Radio Voice and now Staticom is to filter and do all of the things that people do with audio cleanup and ITC when they get home. We do it at the moment of contact, because when you get home, the conversation's over. So we're filtering it. For the first ever in ITC history, we're the first ones. We slow down the flow of live white noise. So we denoise it, slow it, and then if we necessary, it'll gain amplitude, and then it comes out. So Staticom was born because what we did was, in an effort to vet the authenticity and foolproof as best we can, because we don't want to fool ourselves, we looked at what the cynicisms were of ITC, and we tried to remove or address those things. So now we use a white noise generator. We don't use a radio for white noise. So it's closed circuit. It runs with no ambient points of entry. You can't interfere with it with a baby monitor or a CB, ham radio, none of that. It doesn't receive a signal, doesn't record. Closed circuit, filtered, slowed live, and then voices come out. So that's what Staticom is. And we did, and that's what I loved about the Rathmans, that like Lourdes and I, they looked at, and I know this is how you think, because I've seen how you discuss things and how you work. We looked at, because there are cynicisms or criticisms to methodologies in the field, and if you just shut them off and go, that's BS, you don't gain anything from it, and they don't go away. So we said, all right, what are the two big things? Of everything we've heard, the things that had validity were, A, you're getting radio bleed through, right? With the ghost box, you're using a radio. Even when we were on a vacant channel, people could say you're getting radio, even though it was a vacant channel. But so be it. So we removed the radio. The only other thing left was that what's coming through, we were told once before from an audio person, and we've had audio engineers examine our files as well, but this specific one, that they were warbles and artifacts of sound, because white noise is random, and we can always discern patterns in randomness. So I went, all right, that's a valid concern. Let's unpack this and see if we can make sense of it or at least address it. So first of all, and this happens, this happens not only in the paranormal field like crazy, but in science, random. Random is an empty drawer. It's what we say when at the time it is not plausible or possible to calculate or measure factors in the process. So we say it's random. But white noise is not fundamentally random. There's charged ion particles, quantum fields, electromagnetic fields, what we think is deterministic speech. So it's not fundamentally random. What it is computationally irreducible. At the time, it can't be calculated. You can say the same thing for the coin toss at the Super Bowl if you want something more mainstream life, right?
Right.
They go, it's a random toss. It's random heads or tails. It's not random. You have trajectory, angular momentum, wind speed, gravitational forces. But they're not going to have a team of scientists on the 50-yard line calculating all that stuff. They go, it's just a random toss.
Right.
So random is an empty drawer. The other thing we looked at was to say that we can discern patterns in randomness is not a statement of debunkery. That's an appeal to our intellect. That's how we communicate. When we hear consonants, vowels, allophones, phonemes connected in what's familiar speech with syntax, right? Contextually, referentially, that's how we communicate. We don't hear the cat go meow, 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 meow and go, oh, he wants to get in the car and go get treats. So that's not a statement of debunkery. That's an appeal to our intellect. So we looked at that and we went, well, this explains. And then when you look at the tonal depth, the consonants, vowels, diphthongs, cadence, it matches speech. We've had audio engineers analyze it, the files, a lot of them, and it matches speech. Added to, on our team, Lourdes, by trade for the state of New York, she's a licensed court reporter. Now, when you're trying to identify language from any process like that, as much as the audio engineer can tell you how sound behaves, how to produce sound, what it does, I will lean with the audio expertise of the court reporter every time. Because she listens to linguistics, she listens to language, different cadence, speeds, tones, talking over each other for a living. So when she identifies speech, not to mention a whole room does at the same time, there's something to be said.
Yeah, I love that. I love that aspect. It's why, I've had investigations where we've had police officers on the team, and because of their detective skills and their training, I love that, because when they encounter something that they can't explain away with their training, you might have something there. And for those of you watching this for the first time that don't know what the letters ITC stands for, that's instrumental transcommunication, just for those people that have never heard that term before. I want to quickly recognize David and hey, Christine, how are you? And Eddie and Jean also on the cast. That's thank you for dropping by. Hey, Christina, she knew me from my comedy club days. So
cool. We share that background too.
Yes, we do, because you were in the comedy club circuit. Yes. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Satire is philosophical in nature, right?
It is. Well, of course, and at least for me, it helps me make my books entertaining a little bit. At least I've been told anyway. But one thing about the Staticon that I did want to ask you though, what was your holy crap moment? Like there must have been one spirit communication that came through where you just said, "Holy, okay, that just sealed the deal. This is for real." What was that moment?
There's a couple for different reasons. I'll give you a few quick encapsulations of those moments. One of them, I have a file. This one was the impetus for us to slow it down in real time, which I asked a bunch of Ghostbox people at the time, how do you slow down live white noise? The flow of it, not a sweep, because it doesn't sweep. And nobody had an answer right away, but then Rathman, within 48 hours, found the component that we use to this day. And it makes not having to review it and slow it down almost a thing of the past now. So this one time, it was in Vernon, New Jersey, and in real time, all I heard was on. And I was running a test while everybody's walking the location. I said, if you know who I am, go ahead and say it. All I heard was on. I went, it's turned on. On this recording, because this is before we slowed it down in real time, I sound intoxicated. 50% slowed down. 50% slowed. I assure you I wasn't. When I played it back with feeling and emotion, and it's a female vocal tone. It was, I believe, my mother and grandmother, and the voice goes, Ronnie, it's Mom, it's Lucy, I'm connecting. And I didn't hear any of that. And then I asked, is my mother going to be with me tonight? And then the voice goes, yes, you're lucky. That was a huge moment. I could at some point later on, I could share that one. Mind blowing, because I didn't hear it in real time.
Wow.
And the other part of that, and I know that you have an appreciation for this, this is why we need to have reverence and respect and familiarity with those who came before us, those whose shoulders we stand upon, because the only reason that led to a breakthrough where we slowed it down in real time was I remembered Konstantin Radove saying that the vocals not only come in faster than we can detect them, they come in faster than the human vocal tract is capable of speaking. So that was an aha moment for me when that all came back to me, and I remembered reading that. That was why I looked to slow it down in real time. One of the other ones was we would ask session numbers. We would always number our sessions for the first few hundred. And we would ask, can you give us the number of the session? Never, never, never. And then one time, the voice went 1, 3, 7. And we all heard it. And it was, whoa. That was another one. And then probably the other one was the Shanley Hotel, which I know you know, in Napanoch, New York. We had a voice that spoke on a rant for about 1 minute and 6 seconds, nonstop. Just one voice talking for that long, the same voice. And I've never seen a ghost box do that. And I was reviewing it, and Lourdes was in the other room, and she goes, "What are you laughing at?" I was laughing like a little kid. And I went, "The guy's still talking. The voice is still talking." So that would probably be the third one. That one was another one I was blown away by how long the message was and the clarity of it.
That is so cool. That is so cool. That really is. I know you have a new book coming out.
I do.
I think I was going to talk about this later, ask you about this later, but let's talk about it now.
We can. I mean, the book is a fusion of well, it's also, I think my books chronicle my journey, right? I think some beliefs or some ideas that I held in the beginning I still hold, especially when it comes to personal accountability and self-respect, having integrity for oneself,
right,
regardless of how people in the field may behave, not meeting that level. And some things on the educational side, I've always reserved the right to be wrong and learn, and I've changed or expanded on things. I've expounded on things that I thought before. And most recently, which is why I love this fifth book I'm excited about, we as the Staticom team has taken on a philosophy of mind, of consciousness, called analytic idealism, which is basically the idea that reality is mental in nature. And through that, we've seen that all these things that we consider paranormal are quite normal. And what's supernatural is actually quite natural. It's nature doing what it does. And it brought a lot of things together. And I've been studying it for the last few years, and every page I turn, everything I'd watch, I'm waiting for the ball to drop and be like, oh, it just debunked threw away everything we do. And it didn't. It kept making more and more sense of what we do, but in a way that makes it plausible without conflicting with things like science and theology and stuff. Because I think this is one of the things that the field does a lot is they go, science can't speak to this stuff. Science doesn't know everything. This is beyond science. It's paranormal. And then their first key witness they call in to explain everything is physics. Wait, you can't do that. You just threw science out of the room, and now you're bringing physics back in to prove your point. You can't do that.
Look, if I hear one more skeptic say there's no proof, we understand what they're talking about. Scientific proof, it has to be falsifiable, repeatable. We get it. But there's still mountains of evidence. There are, evidence and proof are two different things. And people don't go, oh, there's no evidence. I said, no, there's evidence. There
abundance.
Might not be tons of evidence, mountains of evidence.
Yes. And science doesn't prove either. Math proves. Science doesn't prove. Science leads into what's the most probable, rational possibility, with being skeptically parsimonious and trying to explain it, and assuming and taking into account all possibilities on the table, which I don't think in this aspect we can even know. I don't think we know what all the possibilities are. So we're working with the ones we think we know, and whatever the full gamut of that is. But that's the other reason why we found so much value in a philosophy, because everybody's operating in this field under a metaphysics, which, by the way, another thing that I think that happens in the field a lot is that metaphysics is not analogous to spiritual woo-woo stuff that ghosts just do things. Metaphysics, by definition, means that which stands behind the physics, right?
Right.
And so you either have a physicalist point of view, an idealist point of view, solipsist, panpsychist. There's certain metaphysics on the table as what reality is. Science doesn't tell us that. Science is in the business of telling us what we're going to see next. It predicts and models what behaviors nature has, what reality does. It doesn't tell us what reality and nature is. That's a philosophical argument, which is what a metaphysics is. So that's important too. There's no one of the biggest red herrings that we chase our tails on is an objective consensus truth. It doesn't exist. Even when you get data from instrumentation, you're interpreting it. It's subjective. Everything is subjective. When you have a consensus, you feel like there's more of a unitary front going on with it, but it's still a subjective experience to every individual who's partaking in that.
I agree. And Chris in the chat just said that you are possessed of a brilliant mind. I couldn't agree more, Chris. And let me tell you, Ron and Jenny Colucci, they intimidate me a little bit because people tell me I'm smart. But let me tell you, when I'm in a conversation with them, I'm like, okay, how can I sound more like them so I don't feel inferior?
No. Chris DeCesare is one of the kindest, nicest, brilliant human beings I've ever met. I love that guy. He has absolutely influenced the way that I do my presentations and lectures. The meaning he has. I've never seen somebody connect with people over and over and over again on a deep emotional level the way he does. He's amazing. And you, one of the reasons you and I click so much is because I'm equally impressed with you. I think your mind is brilliant. You take an academic approach to this stuff, and we agree on a lot. Maybe some stuff we'll find out we don't agree on, and it doesn't mean
that doesn't matter.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's how we come to some kind of a consensus, maybe together, to think maybe this makes more sense collectively. But I think taking the extra step to look at that, like for us, we get hit with what all the time, especially from the lay people. You don't think this stuff is real. You don't think ghosts are real. You don't think this is real. So how many people do you see in the field that take the extra step back to even think about what they think reality is? Right. In order to qualify or disqualify something as real, you have to have an idea what you think that reality is. And then from that, you can make a value judgment to go, this is not real or it is real. So we have to know what metaphysics we're operating under. The worldview is physicalism, or what's known as materialism, which is that there's a physical world out there outside of consciousness that has standalone existence and has all its measurements. Yep. And then consciousness is created in your brain, and that's where all the experience is.
I think that's where we really click, because I started talking about Robert Lanza, and you're like, yeah, and like nobody in this field talks about him. Why? I have no idea. And we connected on Facebook, and I think you friended him on Facebook. I mean, talk about him. Time Magazine's one of the 200 top scientists of the 20th century, or most important scientists, I think they said. Mm-hmm. I mean, the man is just amazing, and the fact that he has proven, at least in his worldview, that consciousness creates reality, and if that is the truth, consciousness is an intangible thing, at least insofar as how we view what tangible things are. Right. But no, I agree with you 100%. I want to show everybody the cover of your book. Can we do that now?
Anytime. I appreciate you doing it. Yeah, okay, it's going to be out. It's going to be out soon. Not yet.
Folks, here we go. This is the world premiere. I think it's the world premiere. The cover of Ron's new book. Here we go. There awesome. We go.
Appreciate
the
that.
Cover of Ron's new book. And by the way, Ron, I'll send you that file after this.
I appreciate it. No, that's awesome. I appreciate that you did that.
I don't use it for anything. I don't know. I said, oh, he sent me this picture. I got to make something out of this. Okay.
Oh, that's very, very kind of you to do. And the book is a lot of the Statacom project, and it breaks down the methodology of how we work with the white noise. And it's got a lot of analytic idealism, which I studied a lot of the works of Dr. Bernardo Castro, and that's where a lot of this stuff started coming together, where it made sense to me. There is a world out there. We believe that there is a world out there, but we also know, and this is from several years in quantum field theory and quantum physics, that physicality is born of measurement. Mm-hmm. Physical parameters don't exist. And then when you observe, then they reveal those measurements to you. Those measurements don't exist until they're observed. Physicality is born of measurement. And where we've gotten lost culturally is we think that we live in this world that's exhaustively defined in quantities, right? The world we live in is 50 pounds, 200 yards, 4 feet,
Right.
8 kilohertz. You can't hand me 8 kilohertz. It's not a thing.
Right.
Right? It's a description. And somewhere in science over the last couple hundred years, since like pre-enlightenment, we've taken the description and put the description before the thing described.
Right. I
by saying that's the world we live in. It's like saying I have a map and the map precedes the territory.
Yes.
The map only has value because it's referential. It's pointing at something else. You can't take the state of New Jersey out of the map.
Look, Ron, how long? Let's take human history. How far back do you think the belief in spirits in the afterlife goes? We know at least 6,000 years, at least. As far as recorded human history is what? Ancient Babylonians. So maybe a couple thousand years before the Egyptians. We now know through archaeology that even Neanderthal, a primitive man, buried their dead with ceremony, burying them with tools that were quite valuable back then. But they buried them with their dead, most likely because they thought the dead were going to use them in the afterlife. So what does that really tell us? That tells us that there's an innate belief in the afterlife. There's something that inside of us, we instinctively know it exists.
I believe that.
You know, I don't know. I mean, look, at the jury's out with me on reincarnation and things like that. If there is reincarnation, then there is definitely something called spiritual amnesia. There's a lot of names for it. And of course, the reason for that would be if you remembered all of your past lives, then you would spend every waking second of this life looking for the people you loved in your past lives. So
right. So
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So an interesting thing is, under the idea of analytic idealism, with reality being mental process, and not mine or yours, but just the way my thought, you acknowledge mental processes outside of your own, like mine or other people. So it's reality being mental in nature, and then the world we experience that is out there is we perceive it as physical, but it's a representation of what's out there. It's not the thing out there itself, which is why we exhaustively describe it and think the descriptions are the thing. We get confused because we have to, language compels us to label things as specific names or nouns, so that for the purpose of just talking about them, right? So when we lecture, a lot of times we'll say, like, what is this? It's a fist. Where did it go? It was never a thing. It was a doing. This is a behavior of the field of subjectivity. It's not something with standalone existence. So we do that with our interpretation of reality. Now, if you look at reality as mental processes, and then under idealism, we would all be alters, and it's a modality that we see in nature. So we're not inventing something. Idealism's been around forever, for quite some time. Jung, Schopenhauer, Spinoza, it goes back. And the idea is that there's one universal consciousness, one mind, of which we are all fractal parts or individual alters. And we know this happens in nature, because what used to be called multiple personality, or DID, dissociative identity, has that one mind that appears as multiple centers of identity, and they're dissociated states within one.
There's associated fields of thinking with that, like the morphic field theory and universal consciousness, that we're all tapping into this universal field of knowledge. And we're all also part of this universal field of energy, which is actually giving us life. I mean, Dr. Robert Lanza said that your kitchen doesn't exist until you walk into it. He says, until you walk into it, it's just probabilities. So, I mean, it's crazy stuff, but I sure hope some of the things I own exist, because they were really expensive, but
well, they do, but we name things. We name things for the purpose of being able to talk about them. But the naming conventions are arbitrary, right? You go, I want to buy a car, right? So what's a car? You go, all right, well, a car has to have an engine, so the engine is part of the car. Has to have tires, or the car won't go, right? So the tires are part of the car. For the tires to grip, they have to have a road to grip. So now the road is part of the car, and they won't grip the road without gravity. So now gravity is part of the car. and the road and gravity are part of the planet. So the planet, see what I'm saying? So the
I
boundaries
do
are
exactly what
arbitrary
you're
for the
saying.
purposes of differentiating.
Right.
But it's all, we think, part of one universal mind. Just as an idea for how this even works, under analytic idealism, the one mind as fractal parts or individual alters. In a study, I think it was in the Netherlands, where there was one woman who had 5 alters, and 2 of them claimed to be blind. When one of the blind alter was in executive control of the body, there was absolutely no activity in the visual cortex of the brain, which shows you that dissociation, it's literally can be blinding. There was nothing wrong organically with her whole ocular system. Everything was fine. When another alter was in possession of or control, boom, activity restored. So we think that that's our separate boundary between each other, that we're all part of the one mind. So we're connected to it because we're part of it. The same way, like when you dream, you don't identify as the whole dream. You identify as you. You're the avatar in the dream. But when you get up, you go, oh, wait, that was all me.
Well, let me tell you something. Boy, I'll tell you what, man, don't get me started on dreams, because I have a lot of, look, dreams to me are fascinating, because most people think your mind is making all of this up, but have you ever been in a dream where you're in a total, you're in a location you've never been in before, in this vast landscape? You walk into a house or a mansion that you've never seen before, and you look around, and there's everything that should be in a mansion down to the last detail, even though you've never seen any of this before. Now, are you telling me that the human mind is making that up in a split second? How can the human mind create all of that in the fraction of a second? I honestly think, it sounds crazy, but I honestly think it's an altered dimension of sorts. I think dreams are an altered dimension of sorts, because I think you're actually in a location when you're in a dream. And maybe it has to do with consciousness and the way consciousness creates reality. Who knows?
I think it does. I think we agree on what's taking place. Yeah, I don't think so here's the thing. When you say the mind is creating it in a fraction of a second, the individual dissociated mind like ours, no. But what I do think is that when you're in a dream state, the same way when you're in trance, or when people are under the influence of, like, say, psychedelics or something, when your sensory input is not drawing your focus, your dissociative boundary to the rest of consciousness can be more permeable, where you can experience more openly what is out there in consciousness, in reality. So for us, the ontology, or the ontological primitive is consciousness, the thing from which everything can be explained, but the one thing itself that can't be reduced. And the experience, the way you explained it in the dream state, dovetails perfectly with analytic idealism and consciousness being, that could be a real place, or it could be a place that somebody imagined themselves. And if you're tapped into universal consciousness as a fractal part of it, and you're more permeable at that moment, you have access to that. They use the same explanation possibly for near-death experiences, when people are floating over their bodies and they see stuff happening in the room, right? Think about that. And I had somebody chime in a chat one time that said spirits can see without eyes and ears. Well, we're spirits. So why, through billions of years of evolution, would we have developed ocular and auditory systems for survival if, as spirits, we could see and hear without those? So there has to be something else that doesn't clash with science.
Ron,
I think.
Can you see and hear in your dreams? Yes.
Not in the same sense that we do when we're awake. We're not getting sensory input from a trained person in space.
But in your dream, you're not blind. In your dream, you're looking at things.
You're experiencing what feels like sight, right?
Okay. And you're hearing things in your dreams.
Right.
Your eyes are closed.
Absolutely. The thing where I'd say I differentiate it is that when you're in your normal state, dissociated from other people and the world outside, and we believe there's a world out there, when you're dissociated from that,
right,
you are taking in sensory input through your eyes, ears, touch, taste, smell. But when you're in the dream, everything in the dream is you. You identify, you're dissociated in the dream. You identify as the avatar, as you, but the places, the people, everything you see is coming from you. That is a dream that you are bringing forth, then maybe some of what you experience from the dream is from universal consciousness, like the castle as you described it. But it's not sight in the same way. It's not coming through sensory input, because by definition your eyes are closed.
Right. Correct.
So it can't be sensory input. It's like when you, as an example, when you go outside during the day, the stars you see in the night sky, they're still there, but you don't experience those things at the time. Why? Because your senses are being obfuscated by the lights and noises and sound and the sun, but they still exist. You're just not experiencing them at the time. So the dream, I think, is more endogenous. I think it's something that comes from within, but at the same time, because you're connected to consciousness and your senses aren't giving you stuff to focus on, input, you may be experiencing a wider range of consciousness out there, which is your castle with all the detail.
Do you think spirits can visit you in dreams? And like when you see let's just say you see a deceased loved one in a dream, do you believe that can be the deceased loved one, or is that just completely made up from your mind? What's your take on that?
I think under idealism, I think what that I would see that as is, I would see that as a an organized pocket. I'm trying to think of the way I would normally phrase this. A localized manifestation of that consciousness that was of that person, but it no longer exists dissociated like we do. It doesn't have personal agency anymore, where it's making decisions and calling the shots. But I think it still, as survival would say, I think it still exists, and you can experience it in that state. But I don't think it's substrate independent. Meaning, I don't think it's individual consciousness outside of universal consciousness that are just floating around with no. I don't think that would be substrate independent. It's very difficult to support that as an idea. But I think we survive, consciousness survives the physical death, and then we reassimilate back into universal consciousness, and we're no longer dissociated like we are when we're in physical form. And you can access or tap into those things. And I think the same way through an emotional connection, which may, for some people, give the perception that a spirit or something is anchored to a location or associated with a location. I think this similar idea, if you look at reality again as mental, if reality is mental processes, and then what we perceive as physical is a representation of what's out there, but it's not the thing itself, then you have mental processes mixing it with mental processes or emotional stuff, which we experience all the time. Again, something nature shows us that we don't have to invent. Your thoughts and emotions influence each other all the time. If you look at, for example, the explanations that are given for psychometry or stone tape theory, you have all kinds of problems clashing with physics. You have emotional experiential states, which according to physicalism, if you say there's a physical world out there with wood and stone, all that, if that world is outside of consciousness, then these things are exhaustively explained in quantities. They don't have experiential states at all. The taste of chocolate, the feeling of love, despair, they don't have that. And then we're saying of that world that something happens at a location, and then the despair or the trauma that somebody feels somehow gets soaked into the crown molding of this Victorian wood. And then for reasons no one can ever explain, somehow gets released arbitrarily at different times, and then people feel it. You have all kinds of issues with physics when you do that. If the location, however, is a representation of what's out there as a mental process, then your mental processes are being influenced by other mental processes, the same way you and I could maybe feel if one of us was angry or one of us was happy about something. And then it's mental stuff mixing with mental stuff. You no longer have the problem with physics or science that you're clashing with. To us, if your theorem or your hypotheses clash with science, you have a problem with your theorem or your hypotheses. What we know from science, those regularities, those laws exist for a reason. Mm-hmm. Nature's instinctive, and it gives us things that we can count on that are reliably something that you'll see. So we need not clash with those. Stone tape was originally called place memory, and even back from its inception, no one's ever been able to explain how arbitrarily these experiential states soak into wood and then somehow come out. But if the place is a representation, it's not actually physical with standalone existence, you no longer have that problem.
That's an interesting. It's so interesting. So many questions. I mean, I'm listening to you, and it does give I mean, I have my own personal beliefs on this,
Of course.
But I definitely see where you're coming from, especially when you say, so basically you're talking about residual hauntings not actually being energy being soaked into the surroundings like a lot of people think, but rather, yeah, I'm not going to repeat everything you just said, but it did make perfect sense.
There's no explanation for that in physics, because it's not data. Like people say, well, quartz can hold, data, but it's not data. Data is what we call information. Information is not something that has ontic primitive. It's not an ontic primitive. It's not an ontic or ontological category. Consciousness or experiential states can't be stored in physical matter for two reasons. Well, one big reason is we think, this is not, I think, another cultural faux pas. We think that we have a dichotomy with defining reality, right? We think that everything can be explained in matter or mind, mental stuff, physical stuff. But to have a dichotomy, you have to have two things that exist on the same level of abstraction, right? You have to be able to tell the state of both of those with one question. If you wanted to determine the state of death, and you do a test, and then somebody tests positive that they're alive, you now know the ontological state of death from that one test. You can't do that with mind and matter because they don't exist on the same level of abstraction. Matter, even to what you said with Dr. Lanza, right? Matter exists as observed. Physicality is born of observation, of perception.
Right, correct.
So you have one more level of abstraction between mind and matter, so they can't exist as a dichotomy. So they can't both unilaterally explain reality.
Yeah.
Consciousness or mind would have to have primacy, because before you see matter, you have to perceive it. To perceive, you have to be conscious.
Let me play devil's advocate on one point here, and probably Jenny Colucci would be like really instrumental in answering this question. Let's just say you take a triangle, the ones they use the ones we all saw in band practice when we were in high school, and you strike that triangle and it rings. And you just wait for it to stop ringing. When does it actually stop ringing? When does that vibration, which is what it is, when does that stop? Or does it ever stop? Even on a quantum level, does it keep ringing? That's what I would like to know, because if we could answer that question, that would go a long way to solving the riddle of residual hauntings.
Well, I think, according to the idea behind zero point energy, nothing is completely still, right? There's some level of vibration. Now the answer to that would be the same thing as trying to answer the beginning of time. We can only speak to that to the point that it's detectable or perceivable to us. So that thing would ring. Our determination of when it stops ringing would only go so far as we were able to measure it, both audibly or maybe through instrumentation telling us. But that would be the extent of it. I was reading some of the stuff in the comments from Jenny and the few folks. So David, interestingly, said thoughts are a form of energy and can be stored in quartz. I don't know that there's any data to support thoughts being stored in quartz. Thoughts don't have. They don't have. It's not a. I think we get stuck in physicality and detaching from things being physical in nature. I don't know how you would store a thought. Even when you see brain activity on EEG or fMRI, that's not the emotion. That's the second person perspective. That's an extrinsic appearance of the emotion. It's not the emotion itself. Like, you don't actually ever see love. If you see the reaction to someone on a brain scan when they experience love, that's a second person perspective, right? Fire is not combustion. It's the extrinsic appearance of combustion. Lightning is not an atmospheric disturbance. It's the extrinsic appearance of the atmospheric disturbance. What happens in cases like that with thoughts being stored in quartz is, I think what we do is we mistake the description for the thing described, right? We look at like consciousness. An example from Dr. Kastrup is looking at consciousness as a lake, right? Lakes have excitations. They have ripples. Ripples have physical parameters that you can determine. You can have speed, momentum, height, width, right? Depth, but there's nothing to the ripple but the lake. You can't take it off of the lake. It doesn't have standalone existence, even though you can have measurements and stuff. So as a substrate, it's the lake. And then those things are behaviors of the field. That's something we know from quantum field theory, right? Particles are not discrete things with standalone boundaries. Those are excitations of the field of subjectivity. It's what the field is doing. And the field is not a literal field. It's a modality meant to be able to predict and interpret what reality is doing. So I think when we say that, we're giving physical standalone existence to those things. This whole mindset, too, just to kind of clarify, analytic idealism, the mainstream view is physicalism, that there's this physical world out there, 3D, it's outside of consciousness because your brain creates consciousness and it has all its standalone existence. It's exhaustively explained in numbers, does not have qualities because qualities, experiences, are consciousness that come out of your brain. The reason that falls apart, and this was proposed by a gentleman, I think 25 years ago, named David Chalmers, who was a philosopher, I think from New Zealand or Australia, what's called the hard problem of consciousness, which basically says that there's nothing about any physical quantity in terms of which we can deduce, at least in principle, the qualities of experience. So if you have physical matter that exists out there without experiential states, without love, the taste of a strawberry, any of that stuff, then you can't say that physical matter in here creates it. You would have to extrapolate that if it's here, it has to be out there.
Ron, what's a ghost?
A ghost is a name that we call an experience that we have with what we perceive or believe to be someone who has lived, someone who was incarnate, someone who was dissociated from universal consciousness but no longer is, in a way that we can identify perhaps who they are, or at least in some level anthropomorphize that they were a person, even if we don't know who it was.
Do you believe that a ghost, a spirit, consciousness, I could go on and on with the with the names we have for that ethereal part of us that survives the point of death? Do you believe they're all the same, that all different descriptions for the same thing, the same phenomenon?
It's possible. I mean, I don't know that I would go that far. I'd want to think it through before I would answer something to that degree. But I think there's commonalities that could very well explain it in that way. Again, just kind of like the fist thing, I think we give names to things because that's how we're able to talk about them, to refer to them. So we name things proper nouns, and then they have to us their own existence. But I don't think necessarily that means that they do have an ontological status, which means a beingness. It's something it is to be them, right? There's something it is to be you. There's not something it is to be the table.
Right. By the way, there's a very funny string going on right now in the comment section. They're still talking about the triangle.
Yeah, the Cesare's a troublemaker. Look at that guy.
It was a very funny comment. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm sitting here chuckling. We're trying to be serious here, and I'm chuckling at the comments.
And I love what they're saying, and people like Chris and even David here, the stuff that they're saying or suggesting is brilliant. It's really smart. I'm expressing the viewpoint of how I see it through analytic idealism, where it doesn't clash with science. So just as an example, when he mentions the stone talkers, they touch the stones and their minds are flooded with thoughts that someone put there like a primitive computer. So we're assigning attributes to something that we don't know. Like there's no data that I've ever seen that thoughts were stored in anything. I think there are things that science fiction has inculcated us to the point that we have culturally manufactured a belief in things that maybe don't have any foundation. I would say that stone thing that he's talking that touch the stones, I would say that's similar to psychometry, where somebody touches the house and then they get visions, or it comes to them what happened there, or maybe things that played out there.
Yep.
I think that the difference between how I'm explaining it and how perhaps David was seeing it is the difference between the metaphysics. If your metaphysics is physicalism, then you need physical things to absorb experiential states, which no one's been able to explain, in order for that narrative to hold up. But under idealism, if physicality is only the representation of what's out there, it's not the thing out there, then there is no stone. The stone is the representation of something out there as we perceive it. If it's not physical with standalone existence outside of consciousness, then it's a mental process. And then you can have mental processes that are emotional, that are tied to that experientially, because someone who had experiences, like you said, now you're touching the stone, and what we perceive as a physical experience is, again, mental processes mixing with mental processes, and you no longer have to explain through science how that's possible. But I've never seen anything to suggest that thoughts can be stored in anything and then released. How would you store a thought? What is a thought? You can have thoughts. Thoughts are endogenous, right? You could be sensory deprived, no sight, no sound, no, in a dark room, temperature completely neutral, and you could still start lusting for somebody that you've seen before. You could still start feeling hunger. These are endogenous states that don't need to be the product of perception that we believe is coming from a world outside of us. So I think with the stone thing and like psychometry, again, idealism holds up because it's skeptically parsimonious, which means the least amount of theoretical entities without inventing shit to explain it. Because you can interpret data the same way or different ways, the same data. Like I could go outside in the morning and there could be footsteps in the mud by my house. And I could, from that data, go, well, somebody tried to break in. They saw the door was locked. They saw an alarm system on the window. They thought it was a bad idea and they left. From that same data, I could also say that a ship came down from the rings of Saturn, landed in my neighbor's backyard, stole its Crocs, made popcorn in his kitchen, came to my door to see if I had butter, realized there wasn't any on the counter, and went back out into space with his popcorn. I could say the same thing from that data, but one of them is inventing theoretical entities to create a narrative, and the other one's working off of things that we know, things that nature tells us, things that science can speak to. So that's part of it. I think to not invent theoretical entities for the purposes of a narrative and to not clash with science. I think everything experientially that he's describing with the whole stone thing, I believe happens. In no way, shape, or form am I denouncing the experience. What I'm saying is that when you say that experiential states like emotions, feelings are somehow absorbed into a physical object and then released for reasons nobody can explain arbitrarily, you're running into all kinds of problems and clashing with science. And so we like idealism because it doesn't.
So are you telling me that there's no such thing as a haunted doll?
Well, first of all, I did have a Statacom session where the voice said as much.
Here comes the haters.
Well, so again, I'm going to go back to the same disclaimer I said a moment ago. I think the experience is
a haunted doll, by definition, is going to have to hold some type of energy, and an intelligent energy at that.
Right. So think about it for a minute. This is where it's so important, and it's a huge undertaking in one podcast to kind of impart this, because it took me a few years of studying it. When you go to the metaphysics, right? Science tells us the behaviors of nature, right? The regularity is what it does. When you're talking about that, you're talking about an ontology, the study of beingness, which is philosophy. Now you're talking about a metaphysics. If you believe that reality is physical outside of consciousness, then you have to explain how some spiritual energy gets stuck in a doll and does what it does and all that stuff happens. If your ontology, if your metaphysics is that reality is mental processes and we experience only a microcosm of that through our limited senses, it's a representation of what's out there. Then this mental idea of a doll that we perceive as something physical, because even with Lanza, the kitchen doesn't exist till you're there, right? So the doll doesn't exist till you observe it. So the doll is a mental process that is represented to us as what we perceive as a doll. Then the emotional stuff and everything that comes with it that people think they experience from the doll doesn't clash with science, and you don't have to explain it in a physics way that's saying how it's absorbed, how it's held, how it's released, how it does what it does, because it's also a mental process. We have, as you know, we have limited senses. We can't see the whole spectrum of light. We can't hear the whole spectrum of sound.
Correct.
We have, through our senses, what we can perceive as the salient points to navigate life and not get crushed, right? Not get killed. We have survival sensory input is pretty much what we have. Right. The metaphor from Dr. Kastrup that we love to use is that for us, maybe this will make the idealism thing clearer. We go through life like a pilot in a plane who has a dashboard, right? The dashboard measures and calculates and tells him what's going on outside the plane. Even if he didn't have a window, he could fly and navigate the plane because he gets enough information from the outside through his instrumentation. That's us. We don't know every last little detail of life and everything there is to know about reality. We don't. We have limited senses. We already know it's sight and sound. We don't have the whole spectrum. We can't grab it all. So we have, those are our instruments. That's our dashboard. And through our dashboard, it measures and tells us what's going on around us, and we navigate life. But the difference between us and the pilot is that the pilot never mistakes the dashboard for the sky, for what's out there. We do. We think that everything we perceive is reality in its entirety. And I don't think, again, to not clash with science or physics, I don't think it's possible because we don't know the full scope of reality in nature. So we don't know of any upper bounds to the structural integrity and how far it could encompass or go, right? But we do know that our cellular structure and integrity does have an upper bounds. It does have a limit. So we would literally turn into entropic soup if we took in every detail of what was out there, a mirror of reality as we see it. We would melt. It would be overload. It's a like example would be your computer, which you're sitting in front of. You have icons. You click it, opens a folder. You click another little icon in there. It plays a video. You have things moving, sounds, a whole experience. But if you had to experience every codec, every line, every code, every number, everything that the transistors and every little electric switch did, your head would explode. So our sensory input gives us an interface to reality. We don't experience all of it. We're
correct, yes.
We're monkeys on a rock with higher cognitive function for maybe 50,000 years. We can't know everything that there is to know about everything, but we do have enough input, I think, to navigate life.
You know, I knew that this conversation was going to get as heavy as it has. And Ron, you do not disappoint.
Oh, you bring it out of me.
Yeah, I love it. No, seriously, because you know what's cool about this conversation, and we're kind of like winding down the clock here. There's a couple things I want to do. But what I really like about this conversation is it shows a side of the paranormal that people just don't see. They don't see the real the insights that you can bring to the table. You know, I try to tread that line between being, you know, ultra scientific and, you know, metaphysical myself. Sometimes it's not easy walking that tightrope. But there are a few books, and I actually assembled them, that I want to show people that I think would be really good if they want to go down the road that you've gone down, to really, you know, really try to make sense of what we're perceiving as the paranormal. I think that's the best way I can put it. This one I love, and we're going to show your book again after I do this. Science at the Doorstep to God. I think this book is amazing. I can't, I mean, it's actually written by a priest, but it's not very religious. It's very, very scientific, heavily footnoted and annotated. And I recommend this to anybody who really wants to get into why it makes more sense that there is an afterlife than there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
This one is kind of hard to find, but if you can get it. How to Photograph the Paranormal. This is written by Dr. Lenore Sweet, PhD. This is heavy on the orb subject that you and I discuss at length. And by the way, folks, Ron submitted a video to me earlier today of an orb vortex that blew my mind, and I sent it to the best orb expert I know, Dr. Christina Rawls, and she's a real PhD, and she studied orbs more than anybody I've ever known, and she was blown away by it. She's going to actually share that with a few other people.
That's cool.
When I was on your show, Ron, we talked about the Orb Project, which is written by Klaus Heinemann, PhD, a NASA scientist who started out investigating orbs after people saying they were dust. He thought it had to be something more. He took the resources that were available to him from NASA, things like clean rooms, and he's done underwater experiments, and it's come to the conclusion that there's something more to orbs than just the dust theory. And recently, This one, I saved for last because I think everybody should buy this and read it. It's called Phenomena. This is his latest book. And in this book, he discusses crop circles, all types of phenomena, but he also doubles down on the orb theory with new ways of explaining it. And I think it's everybody should get this book, Klaus Heinemann, PhD, Phenomena. And once again, I am going to, because I made it, we're going to show Ron's new cover, folks. Here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
I appreciate that, and I love that. I love what you do. You're sharing books. When you were on our show, a bunch of people ordered the Orb book literally during the show because of you and because of how well you speak to what you speak to, and not surprised that the way you address things and the way you address the paranormal and the way you carry yourself, that you have people in your audience. I was reading a lot of the stuff. David's clearly brilliant. And I love what he said. He goes, every time a debunker opens their mouth, him and his research partners co-author a research paper, scientific paper. That's great. We have to have a voice to answer a lot of these things, because and that's why I think for us, like, we embrace the idealism so much, because there are things that we can learn and know with science. And I think as a field, there's a lot of what's called spiritual bypassing, where ghosts just know how to do that. Ghosts just do this. It's just what they do. And that doesn't explain anything. Science is not always right. But there are regularities or laws that we're aware of. We need not clash with those in trying to explain the paranormal. I think that's where we make a mistake. But if we can address things without clashing with those things, I think then there, you have a stronger fundamental position for what you're trying to speak to.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what we need to do as a field is get away from the demon, which if you're here on YouTube, you're going to see that a lot.
Right.
And watching the ghost hunting shows that are sensationalized to keep their viewership. Start reading some of these books. I mean, I throw them out there. I have other books too, but these are really good. These will give you a perspective, and they'll start making you think. And that's not the only book that Ron has. Ron, how many books do you have so far?
That's the 5th one. There's the other 4 are on Amazon. Cool. Paranormally Speaking, Knowing and Talking to the Unknown, ITC Technomancy, The Magical World of Spirit Communication, TDSI, the Digital Seance Initiative, and then the last one was Paranormalization, Memoirs of an Academic Layperson, and then now this one, which is Afterlife. I don't remember the name of the title. It hasn't come out yet. Afterlife.
Wait a minute. Here we go. That's the title.
Yes. Afterlife Contact, a New Perspective. And the new perspective is looking at this through the lens of idealism. Like I said, all the different things that came up, I don't disagree with psychometry. I don't disagree with stone tape, but I think that the way we explain them does clash with science. I think it does. I think it's born out of epistemic dependency. These are things that were just passed down to us, and we take what we learn from what we believe other people learned, and we don't question them. They're axioms that we just kind of roll with and go, all right, well, that's just how stuff happens. Right.
You're trying to get a little bit deeper and trying to find the causation. And you're certainly going down the path that you are, you're taking a logical step-by-step approach based upon your research up to this point. And I think that's absolutely the way to go. And I kind of do the same thing. And some of my conclusions might draw to a slightly different realization, at least from my perspective, but it doesn't mean that I'm right. Exactly. It just means that that's what makes sense to me at this point.
That's what logic is. Logic is a collection of axioms.
Yeah, exactly. So, and once again, folks, this is a really great example of me trying to sound as smart as Ron. It's not working very well.
Oh, come on, stop. You're a brilliant dude, man. I have a ton of respect for the educational value you put into your stuff and into the field. I'm just, like I said, from the beginning, I'm just another student. I'm not saying I'm right, but in an effort to vet the authenticity of what we do with vocals, in an effort to understand a reality, because I think if we say this stuff is real, if that's our argument, then however I could support that. And I think that one of the things that's missing from the field is a philosophy, is an ontology. What's your metaphysics? What is reality to you? And it's important, I think, when we get stuck in the worldview, which is physicalism, or we used to be called materialism, that this world outside of consciousness exists out there. That's when we run into problems. That's when you have stone tapes and psychometry that are clashing with physics, because you can't explain how that happens that way. But if you look at it under a different lens, you can.
I mean, I got to hand it to you, though. I mean, you're not only one of the nicest guys I know in this field, but you've also been an extremely vocal supporter of us. And I appreciate that. And I'll tell you why I appreciate that, because I was just talking to somebody earlier today. I don't really know what happened, but ever since our YouTube channel started growing as it has, the silence has been deafening. And there's so much competition in this field where there shouldn't be any. We should all be trying to find the answers. And I really, really appreciate those who are willing to support us, and because we support people in return. But I got to give you kudos for that, because you're just great that way. You really are. You, Jenny's the same way. And everybody in this chat, actually, I'm going to put everybody in this chat in that category. And I appreciate the support, and you've really supported us, and you always have a kind word to say. And when I was looking for people to come onto this podcast, you were the first one to say I would be honored to do it. And believe me, that means a lot. I don't forget those things.
No, I appreciate that. I think the personal endorsement means more than the superstar thing in the beginning. Not that I didn't appreciate, because I know where you're coming from, but at the end of the day, man, when you do this stuff and you see the people in the chat, you have people like Kasun and David, who are clearly brilliant if you read what they're saying. Todd and Carmela and Raul, people that we've worked with personally, Jenny. That the memories that you make, the experiences we have in the field, that's the stuff you're going to take away from us. We're not proving anything. The metaphysics and the philosophy is so important, because that's where you're going to have regime change. That's where you can have a shift, maybe in ideology, is through older generation dying off, and then maybe a shift in beliefs and through empirical states and people doing stuff like you're doing, like what folks in the chat are doing. That's where you'll grow legs to maybe take steps in another direction. But as long as you mentioned, as long as the brass ring is to be popular, to put demon on everything, to inflate the paranormal with horror, to invent things for the purposes of having a narrative, and not having any support for it. I think there's a lot of axioms like that. Mirrors as portals. You walk into a place, there's a portal over there, and the stairs there's a portal over there.
Yeah.
You can say anything. You can say anything. This, Dr. Kasher talked about something, and I know he didn't create it, but he refers to the flying spaghetti monster. You could say that the planets move around and do what they do in their orbits because there's a giant spaghetti monster that moves them around with his noodly tentacles. You could say that. You can't disprove it, but there's no reason to believe that it's true. There's no reason to look into it. It lacks empirical adequacy. That's how we need to look at the field. Yes, you can say there's portals everywhere. Yes, you could say if you put two mirrors together, you're going to end up on Quantum Leap with that guy who was the actor or whatever. You could say all that stuff.
Right.
But if you can't back it in some way, at least show why you think it, then it's just it's spiritual bypassing. You're just inventing a process. And it happens in science too. The effervescent many worlds interpretation, right? Every time you look somewhere, another reality pops into existence with it. It's
Right. Right.
convenient. It's convenient to say that. If you have a theory that allows for everything, you have a theory that explains nothing.
Well, speaking only for myself here, I mean, I've been investigating since 1990. Actually a little bit before then, but I say 1990 because that was my very first investigation that I got on videotape. So I just use that as my starting point.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's hard for me to break out of a certain mindset because when you've been doing something for so long, you do start to think a certain way and come to certain conclusions that you don't want to deviate from because you feel in your own mind that you've got at least this nailed and this nailed and this nailed. I might not have that nailed over there, but I know I got these three things nailed. So it's very, very hard, at least for me, sometimes to come to the realization that I might be wrong, even after all these years of experiencing the same phenomena over and over and over again. Because I told Jenny this, and she actually liked this. People ask me if I believe in ghosts because you said that you've had that experience too. And I tell people, I said, I don't believe in ghosts. They're like, you don't believe in ghosts? I says, no, I know. I don't believe, I know. Because I've had too many experiences over the years and with very strong similarities that I, at least in my mind, come to the conclusion that this phenomena exists. Now, it's not quantifiable. It's not measurable because I can't put it in a bottle.
Right.
But,
So go ahead. I was going to say, here's where we give science the upper hand in a way that it shouldn't have it. Right.
Right.
You, first of all, what was the word you used? You had all these experiences.
Right.
Everything we know in life, everything directly or indirectly through acquaintance is through experience. Perception comes first. To measure it, to feel it, to see it, whatever, you have to perceive, right? That's just why we think consciousness is the ontological primitive. That's the reduction base from which everything comes. The other thing, I don't want to lose my train of thought here because you were just saying about quantifying, right? So that's when we slip back into physicalism, saying that reality has existence outside of us. It has physical parameters that outside of consciousness, right? So they're not experiential. So you can't measure it. Love exists, right? Sweetness exists, bitterness exists, hatred exists. These things exist. Those are experiential states, right? Mm-hmm. How much does my love weigh? What is the length of my thoughts? So science, measuring and calculating for the purposes of modeling and predicting behaviors, does not tread on experiential states. That's quantities and qualities, or what's called qualia, are two different things.
Right.
You can't quantify those things, but we know more than anything. Experience. We have experience, and those experiences are what we know. You experience love. You can't measure it, so you don't say it doesn't exist. So science proving by measuring and all that bullshit, we need to get away from that thinking because it's not most of what we know in life through experience. You dialogue to yourself internally more than you talk to people externally, right?
He says exactly what you just said in his new book, Phenomena, Klaus Heinemann, PhD. He says that the old paradigm, it's just not going to work for the phenomena that we're experiencing, that we have to come up with a new theory, a new process to measure paranormal phenomena. But he pretty much said exactly what you said. I wish I could quote you exactly what he said out of the book because I'm paraphrasing right now, but he pretty much said exactly that. Exactly.
I think those experiential states can't be measured, and we know they're true. So a perfect example, what David just said, a friend who can see spirits, he sees his ability, he sees them, how they look when they died. So he left the paranormal field. I can imagine that's probably very difficult to stomach. So do I believe that happens? Absolutely. I absolutely believe that happens. We can experience things sometimes that are not part of our normal sensory input. I'll give you a real world, non-woo-woo mystical example. Radio. Right now, radio stations are flying by our heads. Songs, talk, everything.
True.
Our sensory input does not pick them up. They don't register on our dashboard or dials, right? What has to happen for us to pick up on those things? It gets what? Modulated. When the experience gets modulated, Now it's on our dashboard, and we think like what we do at Staticom with the voices, that's what we're doing. These voices exist. The white noise and the resonance allows them to be modulated to when now they're part of our dashboard. Now our sensory picks them up. So it's the same thing. I believe this friend who sees these things and the vision he has, I absolutely believe that they experience those things. That's what you experience is your reality. Even when somebody says it's not real, you're hallucinating. Well, what's a hallucination? It's a conscious experience. So by saying that, they're denying the statement that they're making.
Yeah. Wow. It's crazy stuff. I don't want to end this show. I mean, we got a full house of people. Nobody's leaving.
If you want, and I know this would make Tony Rathman very happy, our partners in Staticom. If you want, I could do a share screen real fast and show a couple of examples of what Staticom does, because
Let's do it.
Part of the appeal of why my ass is sitting here to begin with. I'm not that good to look at, trust me.
Oh, come on. You're a good looking guy. Everybody knows it.
I love you, Bobby. You're nice. You're good to me.
You got great hair, by the way. You told me that you cut your hair yourself, and I
started doing it.
Do that.
Oh, I carefully now. I started doing it during COVID. I tried to get the supercuts right before they closed down that March, and it was already closed. I was like, shit. So I ordered the thing. So it's funny how things play out for a reason, right? I ordered a little thing to cut my own hair, and they sent me the wrong one. But the one they sent me was actually better. And we have mirrors that face each other. No spirits come through them, but haircuts happen. I think that's my message here. And I can see the front and back. Yours is good. I save a lot of money doing it now. It's not that hard to do this.
I didn't do it myself.
I can see the back. The first couple of times I did it, I went too short and I was not happy. Raul says Flowbee. Ironically, the one I have is a really good buzzer, and it works similar to the Flowbee. It has a fan and it sucks the hair into the little tube so it doesn't fall over the place. So it is Flowbee-ish.
Flowbee-ish.
All right, if that's a word. All right, so I'll share a couple here. If you have a few minutes, we'll give some.
Yeah. Let's do it. Absolutely.
So these first two are short, and these are very recent. Lourdes and I were privileged to be invited to the My Haunted Manor, Samuel Miller Mansion in Columbia, PA, by Daryl Marston, Jeff and Trey Bader, and we did an episode with them that just released actually this past weekend. So these are both clips from that. It was one of the most probably vivid Staticom sessions we've had, with voices responding to us. So I'll share a screen with audio, and then when you see the other camera come into the equation, I'll tell you when to bring it in.
Okay.
So it's in the waiting room. So just to refresh for everybody, this is pure white noise, no radio, no sweep. It can't receive or record a signal. It's pure white noise. The oscillations are happening in real time in the generator, not a sleep machine. Going through filtration, being slowed down, and then we reduce the noise floor by the end of the process through filtration. So the only thing left are any voices that emerge. You will hear in this clip, between us asking questions, almost no noise. If anything, complete silence, which is very un-Ghostbox-like as far as how it plays out. So I guess whenever you're ready, I'll switch over to, you want to bring it in?
Okay.
There you go. You get that effect. All right. If you can't hear it, let me know. But otherwise, this is from the very recent at the My Haunted Manor in Columbia.
If they started digging, what would they find?
First, yeah.
Is it a male or a female person? Male or female?
Woman.
Wow.
So if you want to put it back in the green room for a second, I'll bring up another one from there. The other one doesn't have the video part of it, but it's the same place. There was a do not enter sign, and I asked what the sign said, and the response said what the sign says, but it reworded it, which is pretty interesting, because if you take that whole hearing what you want to hear pareidolia stuff and put it in play, it would not have said this, though it was the same message.
We've had this conversation on pareidolia that it's
Yeah.
way overblown and too blanket of a debunk.
Yeah, it gets thrown on like WebMD throws around headache. Here's the problem with it does. Here's the problem with pareidolia. At the level of audio capture that this field as a collective takes in, to say that human hearing is fallible, which it is, explain it all away through pareidolia. We're all mistaken. Hearing what we want to hear. All that. To say that, you would have to have data that came from other areas of life where people were having problems, difficulties. It can't just be predatory to the paranormal. If your fallibility of hearing is plaguing you, it can't just happen with spooky stuff. You'd have to be somebody who goes into work and the boss goes, "You're fired." And they go, "What? A raise? Fantastic. I'm sorry, pareidolia, my prescription ran out." Right? It can't just be spooky stuff.
Right.
So you have to have other data. There have to be other instances to show that this happens at the scale that matches how often we're all wrong in the paranormal. So I think we're hearing stuff. I think these are words that we're hearing. I think people like Lourdes identify a language for a living, and that's 100%. What it is. It's causality now. We're trying to figure out from where they come, from how they hear us. Again, I think the same thing, collective consciousness. I don't think they're hearing us make mechanical sound waves. I think that being connected to consciousness, that are thinking it. So I don't think we're coming through the device thinking it, but I think our thoughts, collective consciousness we're a fractal part of that, makes that information accessible. We've hold up things like my glasses and they'll say glasses. They have to be able to answer us, but I don't, like I said earlier, I don't think through billions of years of evolution to develop auditory and ocular systems for survival, if we could see and hear as spirits, we would never have needed to develop those things. And blindness and deafness would be eradicated. So there's got to be something else. I think that we contributed to the consciousness collectively as part of it, and then they grok that information through us putting it out there, which explains, I think, a lot of the interaction. I think it applies to how a lot of the stuff in Staticom comes through. This other one I'll play now also is from that same mansion.
We ready?
Yep. This is the one that with the sign. So there's no video camera to this one, but you'll still hear the sound.
Can you tell me what this sign
Okay, that's nuts.
So that's another example. Go throw it in the green room again. Now I'll get to a couple that to us I think are supremely mind blowing. We talked about consciousness. We talked about we think we're not communicating with spirits that are substrate independent. We think they're parts of universal consciousness that used to be independent like us. But in one instance, when we were asking questions, I think, or actually this wasn't even on a question. This was just something that came through. A voice pretty much said that it was consciousness, and it named Tony, which is our partner, Tony Srirathan.
That voice seemed to have an English accent. I mean, am I imagining that? It seemed to have like a British accent. That voice.
No, I don't think you're wrong. Window. Here it is. Okay. So whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Okay. Ready? So this one, it looped. It repeats in the end because of how clear the words were. I was kind of blown away by it, so I looped it. But the initial phrase is all together. So just as an example, that's pure white noise. No radio, no vocals. It technically shouldn't be there. That's the resonance we believe with the white noise. I mean, I don't. If that's warbles and artifacts of sound, then I need to get myself some warble and artifact music because I understand that shit.
Oh no. That couldn't be more clear. And I agree with Jenny was just talking about you get accents all the time. I mean, I'm getting them too in the field right now. We did and Jenny, you're familiar with Jockey Hollow. I mean, I know she said that's one of her favorite places where we were getting ITC British accents. I've never gotten that anywhere else, but I got it there because there was colonial soldiers there, and at my great uncle's grave and at a church he built, I was getting an Italian voice. I mean, again, the relevance of the dialects and the accents when you compare them to the locations that you're in, it's mind blowing when that happens, and I could see that Staticom collects that as well, that type of phenomenon.
Yeah, it's some of the stuff. I'm gonna elevate the ridiculous level a little bit here. I was trying to look for one of the ones that are from Tony, also because I have some of his files here as well. When I want them, I can never find them. Maybe up here.
I'm terrible at organizing my files.
Yeah,
video clips.
I'm organizing until I'm not.
15 years of video clips, and no.
Oh yeah, you have tons.
So many. For the most of our career, we use the DVD-Rs, the small mini discs, and I have shoe boxes full of them, literally.
I know I have some of them too because I got them from him purposely for
David,
this.
that's amazing. That's amazing. I see. That's the stuff I love to hear too. That French Canadian investigators having conversations in French with spirits. See, that's amazing. Relevance.
Yeah, timing and relevance are a lot of what we govern whether we think something's authentic or not. And that's one of the issues I think with some of the apps, because apps are going to, through AI, be able to give you things that are relevant in time to where you are geographically. And then so now you start diluting what you could use to vet your information, saying that this is authentic because it had timing and relevance. Now you have something that's going to detract from that. So the app market
always have to know.
Less.
You always have to know who developed the app. I mean, to me, that's critical. I mean, you just can't go onto the Google Play Store and download anything you want and think it's genuine.
Right.
You have to know who's doing it.
Yep. Okay. So here I have another one now. This is one of Tony's. So to go with what we thought about before, we talked about consciousness and that they're not hearing us talk, but it's actually through consciousness. Tony asks how they hear us because we wondered that. How do they hear us? We're not broadcasting out of the room we're in. So they pretty much told him here, they say energy of the mind.
Okay.
How do you hear me speak?
So there is another example. I can do a couple more if you want.
Sure, go for it.
Yes, I was just looking at the comments too. David says some of what we hear might think is random gibberish might be another language. Absolutely. That we don't know.
How many times have somebody said, well, why didn't you ever get a Neanderthal ghost? I tell them I think most of my EVPs are.
Yeah. Well, so another thing that we would explain or address that through analytic idealism and consciousness is that if stuff that's contributed to consciousness comes from our experiences in life when we're dissociated as people, right, with our physical boundary as individuals. If no human being ever contributed to collective consciousness, the experience of being in the presence of a dinosaur, then you wouldn't have that conscious experience to encounter on a consciousness level when you're tapped into the transcendence, which is outside of us, or bigger than us. Let's say we're part of it,
Right.
not outside of us. But so, I mean, that would be my best guess as to why we don't have those types of experiences, because no one that we know of, from at least during the period of time we've had higher cognitive function, where we've had metacognition, which is not only to experience, but to know that one experiences, right? You're breathing, you experience, but you're not aware of it until now I call your attention to it. So when you experience, that's consciousness. There's really no such thing as unconscious. You're either conscious, and then when you know that you're experiencing something, you're metaconscious. You're able to introspect or reflect back and know that you're experiencing something. So I think through that, there's no input. There's nothing ever put into the collective where a human experience interacting with a dinosaur, so that experience wouldn't come to us. That's just my guess. But I mean, to support it in a way that seems to be in league with, stuff that we know from science, stuff that we know, at least how we think we know, with how consciousness or mentality works. So, all right, I will do two more, unless you want more, but I'll do two more. I'm going to show you the one that was the reason why we started slowing them down in real time. This is before we were slowing it down in real time. This is the one I told you where I sound intoxicated, and I wasn't, not for lack of trying. No, I'm kidding. But
50 ghost hunting can be fun.
Yeah. This is 50% slowed down. So think about it, how fast this voice had to be coming in. I don't care if it's an auctioneer on cocaine, they can't talk this fast.
Okay.
This is 50% slowed down, and you hear the emotion, you hear the female. My mother's name was Florence, though that's not said here, but it does say mom. Her mother's name was Lucy, and her mother passed away 2 years before she did, at 99.
Wow. Crazy.
So here's that one. This is what made me think and then talk to Rathman about slowing down live white noise. So here's that one.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay, here goes.
Oh, sorry.
You know who I am? It's turned on. My mother's gonna be here tonight.
So there's that. That was the reason why we started to slow it down.
Wow.
In real time. So do you want one more or two more? Because I'm saving the Shanley one for last for a reason.
Let's do two more. We're already at 1:43, so we'll definitely wrap it up though at 2 hours.
Okay, we can do two more. Yeah, if you want to throw that in the green room for a minute. Can
Yep.
we? I'm going to play this one. I'm going to play another one from Tony Rathman. So, he got the name Marcello Bacci a bunch of times. I have as well. Who was one of the pioneers of direct radio voice. And yeah, I was seeing what David said. Some investigators are starting to analyze the audio, the videos, and are slowing it down and running it through filters to clear up. Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. What we did was we do it in real time. We're slowing it down and filtering it all in real time, so that we can actually have dialogue with spirit in real time, if at all possible. But that was why we did it. Was we thought, well, when you go home and do it, the conversation's over. Let's do it when perhaps there's something that to develop from it. So this is Tony. He not only gets the name Bacci, but his wife addresses Marcello Bacci in spirit, and then he mentioned something about being glad to meet them. It's one of the best ones we've probably as a group captured. But this is that one if you're ready.
Yep.
Okay, you see it?
Yep.
Here goes.
Spirits, can you please try to communicate with us through this device? Who's watching?
Bachi, if you want to know, Bachi, are you keeping track of what we're doing?
Marcello, can you see us?
Yes.
Thank you. Marcello, you started this method. It's working. Can you please try to communicate with us?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow,
I'll say Glad to Meet You is one of my favorite ones.
So far, everything you've presented has been awesome, man. Really great stuff.
Oh, I appreciate it. This is, we're blessed and fortunate to be able to get this stuff. And the irony is that Bocce became most known. He 20-something years of doing. He did sittings at a studio he had in Grosseto, Italy, mostly parents who lost children, and he would give them that connection, that moment of solace, that peace, closure. And we didn't start out to do that. We just started out seeing if we could replicate what they were doing. And now when we go to public events, and we did a place in Jersey where Paul Revere's family lived, his son, and people don't want to talk to the Reveres. They want to talk to Uncle Phil.
Yeah.
Right? That means something to them. And so we started doing digital seance initiative events, TDSIs, for the purposes of giving people those moments like Bocce did. So now we're walking the path, even though we didn't plan to when we got started, but from what he did. And it's the best feeling. The third book, TDSI Digital Seance Initiative, has a bunch of stories where experiences that people had like that through us. And we don't know who's going to show up, just like he didn't. We don't know what words or things that their loved ones would say or know to come through. Sometimes Lourdes, because she hears everything, calls out what she hears, and somebody is like, oh my God. And then they understand it has meaning to what they said. And she doesn't know to throw something at them to spitball them. And they're not hearing what they want to hear because somebody who didn't know what it was heard it. So
I mean, I think that's great. I mean, we don't do what you do. We just try to gather evidence, but I think what you're doing is a very noble thing. And because it really does give people hope, closure, depending on, what it is that deep down, they're searching for. I think it's great. I truly do.
Appreciate that. I appreciate that. It became the most rewarding thing that we get out of doing this now. We had no idea that was going to be the path we'd be on with it, but it's so cool when these people have. There's testimonials on our website. Is Gonyac Paranormal, Gonyac Paranormal, comes from Gonzalez and Iacovetti, both of our names together. She originally did that for an email. Sometimes people say, well, why not Yak Gun? I said, well, because it sounds like a bug repellent and nobody would want it. So Gonyac it is. And then also Tony's site, entityvoices.com. And then we have a YouTube channel. If you look up Staticom on YouTube, you'll see a bunch of the Staticom videos, including some of these tonight. And so I'll play that last one for you now. And I was seeing so David said it's difficult to do that in the field, but it's possible to do that in a way. That's pretty much, that's what's one of the unique things about Staticom is we're doing all that review stuff live. The software we do is primarily a Frankenstein's monster of stuff meant for music production, and we're slowing it down and we're filtering it and we're letting it's audio archaeology to me. It's like archaeologists don't create the bones, they don't make them form, but they gently dust away what reveals and makes them detectable. That's what we're doing. It's something that's already there, and we're trying to gently dust away without distorting it or affecting it or damaging it to reveal it. And we're doing it in real time. And that's the magic of Staticom. With the partnership with Tony and Sri Rathman, since they got on board and it became Staticom over the last 2.5, almost 3 years, huge difference. I mean, they are two of the best people, and the work has taken leaps and bounds forward. So the community offers to us opportunities and relationships that if we're looking to advance something, if we're looking to do something with meaning, those people will cross your path. You'll find your clan, you know. But if you're worried about the next poster you're going to be on, you know, good luck with that, I guess. I don't know. So this one is the one I told you about before, and then we'll end it on this, and I will thank you immensely after this. This is damnation. It's one of the words in it. This is at the Shanley. You'll hear people talking in the background. This is why we started doing seance-like events with Staticom, so people would pay attention, because people in real time missed a lot of this. This is about a minute and change of the same voice on a rant. We don't think it's talking about demons. We don't get a lot of demon stuff at all. We think the demons that mentioned here, we think it's metaphoric, perhaps personal demons, vices that people have. Also, perhaps the celebritizing or glorifying of the demonic stuff in media like we do in TV, like you and I just talked about. We think this is a cautionary message against those types of demons. We don't think you're talking about winged, hooved entities necessarily. That's our interpretation of this. So we could be wrong, but that's what we think it means. So here it is, the coup de grace. Here it is, damnation.
Wow.
So that's not a compilation. That's literally recorded in the order it's been.
I get exhausted listening to that stuff because it's so impactful for me. It really is. Because honestly, and you know, here, this is okay. Now, this is coming from somebody who's been doing this since 1990. That's better than a lot of stuff I've ever caught. I mean, that's just amazing to me. I mean, that's the stuff that I try to get. So
I appreciate it.
Really, really great. I mean, you've heard my evidence, so you know the parameters of what my evidence.
No, your stuff is great. Your EVP collection is fantastic. This, I'm not comfortable taking credit for the level of accolades that you're giving it, because it's twofold. For one, it's based on direct radio voice. Direct radio voice was there all along for the last 25 years, where people kept reinventing ghost boxes. They work. I think they work off the same resonance that this works off of. But when you sweep, every time it hits a station, it's like if you and I were on the phone, I kept intermittently hitting the mute button. They're not availed to the white noise to resonate once it hits a station. So the sweeping by design inhibits the length of the messages. So you have a brevity to the messages.
Right. When you look at the subject matter of what's coming through there, it's obviously not a radio broadcast either, because they're not going to be talking about what they're talking about. I mean, you know, they're sitting there talking about demons, damnation, blah, 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 blah. That's not a radio broadcast. It's relevant to what you're doing. And just like when I had that EVP that we were leaving the cemetery and it said, come back, don't leave now. It's the relevance of the communication. They're not random words. So that has to absolutely be taken into account. And that's why I find this so amazing. I mean, and the thing about your mom, oh my God, I just got a lump in my throat. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. But always to give reverence and respect where it's due. We brought back something that should have never been lost. Ghost boxes almost posthumously rose to prominence as the direct radio voice method seemed to die off because it wasn't on TV with ghost hunting shows. I couldn't believe it when I saw it that nobody was doing it. That's why we took up the mantle and started doing it. Yeah, see, David understands the messages would be longer without the sweep, because you think about it again, right? To not clash with physics. The modality of the ghost box was built in so much as the sweep randomizes fragments of vocal tones that they're able to organize and move around to make words, to manipulate. So think about that for a minute. Think about that in a real world context, right? They have to have certain allophones, phonemes, certain sounds in certain places at certain times to form certain words in certain circumstances when you ask certain things. And it happens at breakneck speed with zero latency in process, which is like superluminal, faster than speed of light contact, which is like impossible. You're moving sounds around. They have to be in the right place. That completely flies in the face of physics. However, if they're around us all the time and it's resonance with white noise, then it doesn't have to traverse any distance and it doesn't have to move sounds around. It's the resonance that makes them detectable, audible. Our dashboard of dials picks them up. Boom. We hear them come out of the speaker because the process modulates it so we can. That's the whole basis of Staticom in a nutshell.
Ron, I want to thank you for an amazing night. And I mean, your insights are gold. And by sharing those clips, you made this episode platinum. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. We are actually going to show everybody your new book cover one more time. Here we go.
I love it.
There we go. Good. Can never show that too many times.
No,
Believe me, I know. Look at my background. So there you go.
No, I love the family angle that you guys have. I think that you have a unique take on it. Again, I love your approach as well. I think we have a mutual respect. That's why I'm here.
Sure.
I would encourage you to continue to do stuff like this and bring on people, interact with people like David, who's in the chat here, Jenny, everybody else who's participating. Keep sharing your dialogue too, because you're promoting education and not to sit back and again, to learn from hand-me-down information through epistemic dependency and just not stand on your own thoughts. Yeah, thank you. It's John, you said, right? Exploring the Supernatural?
Yes. Yes.
Definitely
check out his page. You can go to and Ron, make sure you send me a link of a page you want me to promote, like a YouTube channel. And people that are watching this, it's going to be the pinned comment down below. So you can go right and subscribe to Ron's page. Please do that. Very, very important. So everybody watching this, please like, subscribe, and then go to Ron's page, like and subscribe. Again, that's going to be pinned. That's going to be the pinned comment beneath this episode. And if you go over to our first one that I did with John, you'll see his page is pinned as the first comment.
I'll put it in for you right now.
Okay, perfect.
I'll put it in the I don't know if it'll let me put it in the regular chat. I put it there. I'll put it in the private one too.
Yep, it's right there. Perfect.
So that's where you can see all of our stuff, Tony and Sheree Rathman stuff too.
It's still going to be, I'm still going to pin it as the pinned comment so that everybody, hey, Christine, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And everybody else, thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up and for participating, offering your thoughts, asking your questions. And thank you also to you, Bobby, too, for inviting me to do it, for accepting ideas, challenging ideas, questioning ideas. I'll say it again. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to figure it out. I just, like you, the more I've learned, I'm trying to make sense of things, and I'm trying to walk the line between not conflicting with science or theology, but at the same time explaining things without making shit up, which I think happens way too much. So
I totally agree. And look at that. We are exactly at 2 hours. I love it. Ron, again, thank you for the bottom of my heart. I really do appreciate it. And everybody, thank you for hanging out with us. for these 2 hours. I think it was great. I could not have asked for a better show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. I really do.
All right. Good night, everyone.